Hi, and welcome to Tech Talks, the People and Planet podcast. On the show today, I'm joined by the founder and CEO of Stress Point Health, Sheena Pirbhai. Sheena, hi, how are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
No, good to have you on the show. It's going to be a really good one, I'm sure. So, Stress Point Health is all to do with emotional brain health. It would be great if you could expand on that a little bit for our listeners. You know, what's the problem that the company's solving with the mission, and what really inspired it?
Yeah, so I think the best place to start is with the inspiration because I started Stress Point Health following my own experiences with PTSD.
Hmm.
And I had a road accident. It was a pretty bad one. And I had discovered through my treatment for PTSD, I really discovered how the brain worked. And
Okay.
it surprised me as to the kind of automatic responses that we have. And this is where I really first learned about what emotional regulation is. And really, it underpins everything from stress, anxiety, PTSD, addiction, autism, so many things, so many mental health conditions are underpinned by emotional dysregulation. And yet,
Mhm.
we don't really talk about it. We don't really understand it. The medical community has done a lot of research, but really, in terms of the treatment and the digital community, certainly, we've not really targeted that part of the brain. And
Yeah.
really, it's about your emotional responses to triggers. And emotional responses within the brain are actually automatic. So they're not something that you can necessarily control by yourself. And especially when you've experienced something traumatic or you have a mental health condition, you can feel that level of emotional imbalance. And you
Yeah.
can sometimes feel that your reactions to things are sort of disproportionate necessarily to the situation, or potentially a lot of things are emotionally triggering. And so, what we really wanted to do is kind of drill down into what this means and what this means for people's recovery and treatment. And that's where we really wanted to focus Stress Point Health's development, product development, and really kind of see how can we give people the best outcomes from treatment. And we have
Okay.
to do that through looking at every part of the brain, emotional, learning, behavior, and start to really bring together solutions that can give people the best chance of leading a better life with better mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does it work then? It's a mobile app, right?
Yeah, it's a mobile app. So what we do is we use sound frequency to deliver something called digitized neurofeedback. So
Mm.
neurofeedback has been around for a really long time. Some of your listeners may be familiar with it. It's something that happens in a doctor's office. It's generally quite expensive, a bit inaccessible. So what we want, but it's a very effective treatment for emotional regulation and dysregulation and helping you to manage your emotional responses. So what we've done is we've digitized it using sound frequency, and we offer it through a smartphone app. So right now we're working with clinics and doctors and healthcare providers, but you can also, download the app directly from the App Store if you feel that you're wanting some help with your emotions and your emotional regulation.
Unbelievable. So, it would be the doctor's surgeries in the main who are the sort of the target people at present, would you say? So more like a B2B thing than a B2C, or a bit of both?
A bit of both. I think we're aiming to be B2B2C because I
Yeah.
think it's important. And one of the things I'm really passionate about is that it's important to look at the entire treatment journey for patients and for
Yeah.
people with mental health issues. I think so often with mental health, it sort of operates in silos where it's like, okay, if you've got this particular condition, have CBT or talk therapy. And I really want to bring together with clinicians and healthcare systems the idea that we really need to be offering multiple different ways to achieve the best outcome. So that's why I think our first starting point is clinicians and the healthcare system, so that we can say, okay, you're offering behavioral therapy, but how about let's look at how we can improve outcomes by combining that with emotional regulation focused therapies. And, I know that from my own personal experience, when I first started seeing a psychiatrist for my PTSD, I spent the first 3 sessions just crying or just really emotional. And I couldn't process anything that he was saying because my emotions were just taking over. And so that's when I started EMDR and neurofeedback to rebalance my emotional responses so that I could better process behavioral and cognitive and learning focused therapies. And that's what really got me to where I am today. And that's what I really want to bring to the digital field, that we should be looking at this in this way to really give people the best chance.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of the time when perhaps people have these sorts of conditions, they don't necessarily almost always realize it. And also they don't want to put that title on it. So an app like this, I'm talking from a B2C point of view, could be, a really good solution to be, not have to take it that next step further and start seeing a psychiatrist perhaps or anything like that,
Yeah, and that's really important. And I think one of the things that I wanted to make sure we built into this solution is that you don't need a diagnosis. You just need to connect with your emotional responses, whether that is a specific trigger, whether it's more general anxiety. So you don't need a diagnosis to use the app. You just have to focus in on what makes you react in an emotional way, what's causing you to feel that your emotions are out of control. And the sound frequencies do the work for you in helping to rebalance that in your brain. So and I think that all too often we just label and pigeonhole diagnoses or people or conditions. You've got stress, you've got anxiety, but sometimes we just feel generally like our emotions are just not in line with how we're feeling or not in line with our behaviors.
Sounds like a really interesting product. Like all businesses, it's never a smooth process to get to where you are today. I'm sure there's been some challenges. Can you share with our listeners how you've perhaps overcome those, how you've navigated around them? Any key lessons so far?
Yeah, do you know what? I think whenever you're bringing something new and innovative to the market, there's always resistance in different forms. And I think that the challenge for digital health particularly, and what we found in the UK, is unfortunately the structure of healthcare, which is the NHS, that most people, the majority, 99% of people, look to the NHS for their healthcare needs. And I think with the way that the NHS is overwhelmed and the way they're just trying to keep their heads above water, they're not really able to keep up with or learn about the new digital technologies. And so I think patients are missing out with that. So a huge challenge for us is helping the NHS to understand that this is a really important digital solution, can really help patients, but trying to find the inroads within that. And I think that part of how we overcame that was ensuring we built a good body of evidence. So we're really evidence focused. So we did a lot of research. We did testing with various different groups to really build up data and case studies of how well this works. But it's still a challenge for us. And I think it's a challenge for a lot of digital companies in the UK. And so one of the ways that we look to overcome this is to look at different markets. We're looking to the Middle East, which is a huge adopter of digital health. And they are so far ahead, I think, of many markets that I have spoken to or seen. They just know that digital health
Why do you think that is, Sheena?
I think because they have a newer healthcare system, so they're not battling with already ingrained views or systems or ways of doing things, but also they are just a region that looks to technology and innovation as a solution. They're not scared of pushing the boundaries on that, and they want the best. So they really have a desire to be the best, to offer the best, to experiment, not in the way that we might think of, experimenting on people, but really just try and test. And if it doesn't work, they're okay with that, but they will find their way through. And their digital adoption is it's
Yeah.
astounding, really.
It's interesting. I was speaking to someone yesterday, and he was in the education technology space, but saying exactly the same thing. Ed tech over there is huge, also.
Yeah, it is.
So
And they
you
have
know,
the funding to support it. They
mm,
think they are encouraging companies, digital and tech companies, to come over there. They'll support you. They'll find funding for you. Investors have a different modus operandi out there. They're looking for long-term growth. They're not interested in 5-year cycles that are traditional
yeah,
with VC funding, for example. So they're really looking at building this over a long-term 10, 15-year trajectory. So for a company like ours, that's the way that I want to build as well. It's very synergistic. And I think that enables us to build a company that maybe we then come back to the NHS once we have more data use cases. The UK is obviously my home, and I want to help as many people as possible. So it's just finding the right avenues to get people access to the product.
absolutely, absolutely. And I suppose if there isn't those avenues in the UK, then Stress Point Health could easily go overseas and do really well. You've touched on your the reason why the inspiration behind the company before. What's your background before this? What's your story?
Yeah, so I had my accident right after I graduated from university.
Yeah.
So I sort of deferred starting my career, if you like, which was destined for banking, investment banking, through my physical recovery. But I didn't really deal with the PTSD. So I started in banking as a graduate. Obviously, graduate investment banking job was incredibly stressful. And with the underlying PTSD, after about 2.5 years, I really just had a full mental breakdown. Like, I just couldn't cope. So I left my job. I started getting treatment for my mental health. And during that time, I was getting frustrated with just sort of, receiving treatment. I didn't want that to just be my life. I was a young woman in my 20s. I wanted to really achieve things. So I started my first company pretty much from my hospital bed. I was consulting on financial structuring. It led me into the entertainment world. And so once I was fully better, I was able to travel the world, structuring finance for media, entertainment, movies, TV, here,
Nice.
India, LA. It was fantastic. And honestly, just what I needed to really let go of everything I've been through and really, truly start to kind of heal from a place of, I feel like I lost so much of my 20s to my recovery that I didn't want that to define me. But I also knew through that process I wanted to do something in mental health, but I had to be ready within myself, mentally strong, to be able to bring that experience and viewpoint to what we were doing. So I went off and did that for about 10 to 15 years, sold that company in 2016, started another company in tech advisory, sold that earlier this year. And then prior to that, I'd started Stress Point. So, I was always trying to keep busy and to just bring my experience in the way that I can. And if I had a message for anyone listening, it would be that if you have something you're passionate about, if you have anything that's happened to you and that is your passion or your driving force, do it. Go and do it. Whereas the response you get from people, whether that's investors or customers or partners, from your own passion and experience is next to none. It's stuff that you can't learn, right?
Absolutely. And am I right in thinking that Stress Point Health is all self-funded then at this stage?
Yeah, we did a small friends and family round early days to help us build our prototype and MVP. And then, yes, it's been all self-funded up until now. We're going into some fundraising now to really sort of scale up. But yeah, I've put my money where my mouth is and funded the company myself because I truly believe in the impact that we can have.
And that definitely comes across as well. And like you say, it gives so much more emphasis on what you're trying to do when you're so passionate about it. You talked about overseas before, you talked about scaling up. Anything that you can share with us, any exciting developments?
There's definitely exciting developments in the pipeline. We're certainly talking to companies here who have large networks of people that need mental health support to get our product to them. Dubai, there's some exciting things in the pipeline which I can't talk about, but definitely some exciting things in the Middle East for us. I think we're looking at building the first tech-enabled clinic that would offer a physical space that's integrated with our technology, so people can come and experience the technology and then go home and continue to use it. So that's a really exciting prospect for us in the Middle East. And they think that for them, the hybrid model is really interesting, because I think it's interesting everywhere, and it might be the step that people need to take before full digital adoption. That
almost to ease them into it.
Exactly, yeah. So because healthcare is still really personal. People still want to see a doctor. They still want to have that human to human contact. And I think that whilst digital health has exploded, the uptake from patients is lagging behind, because they're ultimately healthcare super personal. So I think the idea of a hybrid clinic means that people can come there, they can see the tech, get set up, talk, ask whatever questions they want, and then go home in confidence, knowing that they can continue their treatment at home as and when they need it.
Yeah, definitely. And it would be exciting to get you on the next series and talk to you about when that's actually happening and see how it's getting on.
That would be great, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, yeah, there's so much work to do still, isn't there, around stress in general, PTSD. A lot of people don't know that they've got it. I think in the news you talk about people coming back from war zones and things like that, but you're not really knowing that they've got something, emotionally wrong with them, I suppose. How do you see this area of digital health evolving? And how do you think the stress point health can play a part?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think that for a very long time, PTSD was associated only in certain circumstances, and particularly in war veterans, or something really heavily traumatic, like a natural disaster or something like that. But what people don't realize is that PTSD is really far-reaching. My mother developed PTSD from watching me go through what I went through.
Oh, really?
There's a large body of research that suggests that parents who see their kids going through cancer treatment can cause them PTSD, because all it is, well, not all it is, but what it is being stuck in fight or flight, not being able to remove yourself or fight through a situation. It causes an impact on your nervous system, and this is what causes emotional dysregulation and subsequently impaired learning and cognitive function. So you can get that feeling from anything, and I think it's really important for people to understand that trauma manifests in many different ways. And it can manifest at the time, later on. You could experience something traumatic in childhood and feel fine. There's links between adult onset alcoholism and early childhood trauma that people don't understand. They're like, why, what triggered this in me? They feel like it's something, but they can't put their finger on it. And that's where I think sometimes pigeonholing diagnosis can be dangerous, but also unhelpful to people, because they're like, oh, well, I haven't been to war, like it can't be PTSD. But by connecting with how you feel and what you know, or what your triggers are, that I think can be a different approach to getting people help, and ultimately getting them to regulate themselves, either with the help of technology like ours or otherwise, but helping to regulate their emotions, regulate their brain function, and ultimately lead happier, healthier lives when it comes to mental health.
And I think this is right. When we were speaking previously, you mentioned that a key demographic of people that were using it already was men, because you were finding that they would perhaps struggle more so to talk about their emotions.
Yeah, exactly. It's very difficult when you have emotional dysregulation or your emotions are not regulated to talk about it. It can often be re-traumatizing. And even aside from that, I think for men particularly, and in some cultures, I'm Indian culture is very much like this.
Yes.
You're not encouraged to talk about it, or it's seen as a sign of weakness to talk about it. And that's, again, what I wanted to build into the app, is that you don't have to tell the app what your problem is or what you feel your trigger is. You just have to connect with the response or the emotional reaction you have because of it. And yeah, and you're right. That's why we've seen male users and some minority groups finding that this has really helped them, because they don't need to talk about it. They just can get the help, though, even without that. And it's very difficult to break generational or cultural viewpoints on mental health and getting help for your mental health. So I think that we have to, I think, as an industry or as innovators, look at different ways in which we can help people that works for them. Ultimately, I've always been always drilled into my team that we are patient first. It's all about the patient, and how we innovate has to be driven by that.
Sheena, it's a really, really interesting subject, and we are really looking forward to see how the company develops over the next point of time. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's all we've got time for. This is Sheena from StressPoint Health. And guys, if you have enjoyed the content today, make sure to give us a like, a comment, a follow on our page, which is www.thetechnetwork.io. Sheena, thanks very much.
Thank you so much for having me.